The morning of January 15 dawned grey and cold over London, with a persistent drizzle that seemed to mirror the sombre mood hanging over the royal family. Inside the London Clinic, one of Britain's most prestigious private hospitals, Catherine, Princess of Wales, lay recovering from what palace officials had described only as planned abdominal surgery. The carefully worded statement had been released 3 days earlier, sparking a whirlwind of speculation and concern across the nation and beyond. For Carole Middleton, however, the clinical language and royal protocol meant nothing. Her daughter was in pain, and, as any mother would understand, that pain had become her own. The woman who had once been a flight attendant, who had built a successful party planning business from nothing, who had navigated the complex waters of raising a future queen, now found herself facing perhaps her greatest challenge yet, watching her eldest daughter suffer while maintaining the composure expected of a royal family member. The decision to visit had not been taken lightly. Royal protocol surrounding hospital visits is intricate and carefully managed, especially when the patient is as high profile as the Princess of Wales. Every movement is coordinated with security teams, every visitor vetted and scheduled. But Carole had made it clear to palace officials that protocol could not supersede a mother's need to see her child. The arrangements had been made quietly, discreetly, with the understanding that this visit was not about royal duty but about family love. Michael Middleton had offered to accompany his wife, as had Pippa and James, Catherine's siblings. But Carole had insisted on going alone. She needed this moment with her daughter, needed to see with her own eyes that Catherine was truly on the path to recovery. The reports from Prince William had been reassuring but second-hand. The updates from the medical team were professional but clinical. Only her own maternal instincts could provide the reassurance her heart desperately sought. As her car pulled up to the discreet entrance of the London clinic, Carole took a deep breath and straightened her shoulders. She had dressed simply but elegantly in a navy wool coat and matching scarf, her silver hair styled in the neat bob that had become her signature look. To the outside world, she appeared calm and collected, every inch the dignified mother-in-law of the future king. But, inside, her heart was racing with anticipation and anxiety. The hospital corridors were quieter than usual, the result of careful coordination to ensure Catherine's privacy. Royal protection officers stood at strategic points, their presence both comforting and a stark reminder of the extraordinary circumstances that had brought them all here. Carole had grown accustomed to such security measures over the years, but today they felt more pronounced, more necessary somehow. Dr. Sarah Henderson, Catherine's lead surgeon, met Carole at the elevator on the 3rd floor. The doctor's warm smile provided immediate reassurance, though Carole could see the professional concern still lingering in her eyes. "Mrs. Middleton," Dr. Henderson said, extending her hand, "Catherine has been asking for you. She's doing remarkably well, all things considered, but I know seeing you will lift her spirits considerably." As they walked down the hallway toward Catherine's private suite, Dr. Henderson provided a careful update on the princess's condition. The surgery had been more complex than initially anticipated, she explained, though she was quick to emphasize that everything had gone according to plan. Catherine was experiencing some discomfort, which was entirely normal, and her recovery was progressing exactly as expected. The words were meant to be reassuring, but Carole could hear the unspoken details beneath the careful medical language. The door to Catherine's room was marked only with a discreet number, no nameplate or royal insignia to draw attention. 2 protection officers stood quietly nearby, offering respectful nods as Dr. Henderson and Carole approached. "She's awake and alert," the doctor whispered as they paused outside the door. "But please don't be alarmed by the monitoring equipment. It's all standard post-operative protocol." Carole nodded, steeling herself for what she might see on the other side of the door. Nothing, however, could have prepared her for the surge of emotion that overwhelmed her as she stepped into the room and saw her daughter for the first time since the surgery. Catherine lay propped up in the hospital bed, surrounded by the quiet beeping and humming of medical monitors. Her usually vibrant complexion was pale, and dark circles under her eyes spoke of pain and restless sleep. An 4-line ran from her left arm, and various monitoring wires disappeared beneath her hospital gown. But it was Catherine's eyes that broke Carole's heart. They held a vulnerability that her daughter rarely allowed herself to show, even to those closest to her. "Mummy," Catherine whispered, her voice hoarse from the anesthesia and pain medication. The single word, spoken with such relief and longing, shattered every bit of composure Carole had carefully maintained during the journey to the hospital. Without hesitation, Carole moved to her daughter's bedside, her own eyes already filling with tears. "My darling girl," she murmured, reaching out to gently stroke Catherine's hair, careful not to disturb any of the medical equipment.
I'm here now. Everything's going to be all right.
The sight of her usually strong, composed daughter looking so fragile and vulnerable triggered an avalanche of maternal emotions that Carole had been holding back for days. Since the announcement of Catherine's surgery, she had been the pillar of strength for the extended family, fielding concerned calls from relatives, coordinating with palace staff, and maintaining a brave face for the grandchildren who didn't fully understand why their mother was in the hospital. Catherine attempted a weak smile, but Carole could see the effort it required. "I've been worried sick about you," Carole admitted, settling into the chair beside the bed that had clearly been positioned for visitors. The palace statements were so formal, so clinical. A mother needs to see for herself that her child is truly all right.
"The children?"
Catherine asked, her maternal instincts overriding her own discomfort.
Even while recovering from major surgery, her first concern was for Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis. "They're fine, darling.
William is taking wonderful care of them, and they understand that Mummy needs time to get better. George has been helping with Charlotte and Louis, being such a responsible big brother." Carole's voice carried the warmth and pride that always emerged when she spoke of her grandchildren.
As mother and daughter talked quietly, Carole began to notice details that the medical reports hadn't conveyed. The way Catherine winced slightly when she shifted position.
The careful, shallow breathing that suggested significant discomfort. The monitor readings that, while within normal ranges, indicated her daughter's body was working hard to heal from whatever trauma it had endured during the surgery. "You don't have to be brave for me," Carole said softly, recognizing the facade her daughter was attempting to maintain even now. "I'm your mother, Catherine.
You don't have to be the Princess of Wales in this room."
The permission to be vulnerable, to simply be her mother's daughter rather than a royal figure, seemed to release something in Catherine. Her carefully maintained composure began to crack, and she reached out weakly for her mother's hand. "It hurts, Mummy," she admitted in a voice barely above a whisper.
"More than they said it would." The simple admission broke whatever remained of Carole's emotional restraint. Tears that she had been holding back for days began to flow freely down her cheeks. Here was her accomplished daughter, the woman who had married a prince and would one day be queen, reduced to the most basic human need, the comfort of her mother's presence during a time of pain and vulnerability. "I know, my love."
"I know it does," Carole whispered, squeezing Catherine's hand gently. "But you're so strong, and you're going to get through this. We're all here for you, your father, Pippa, James, William, the children.
You're not alone."
The emotional weight of seeing her daughter in such a state, combined with the stress of the past several days, finally overwhelmed Carole completely. She buried her face in her free hand and wept openly, all the fears and anxiety she had been suppressing flowing out in a torrent of tears. Catherine, despite her own pain and weakness, found strength in comforting her mother. "Mummy, please don't cry," she said, her voice growing slightly stronger.
"I'm going to be fine.
The doctors say the surgery went perfectly, and I'll be home soon." But Carole's tears were not just about the immediate situation. They were for all the time she had watched her daughter shoulder burdens that seemed too heavy for one person to bear. They were for the years of watching Catherine navigate the impossible demands of royal life while maintaining her grace and dignity. They were for the realization that, no matter how high her daughter rose in the world, she would always be Carole's little girl who needed her mother's comfort and protection.
A gentle knock on the door interrupted the emotional moment.
Dr. Henderson entered quietly, followed by a nurse who had come to check Catherine's vital signs and administer the next round of pain medication. The medical staff moved with practiced efficiency, their presence a reminder that this was, first and foremost, a place of healing.
"How are we feeling?"
Dr. Henderson asked Catherine, though her experienced eyes were already assessing her patient's condition. The doctor's gaze also took in Carole's tear-stained face with understanding and compassion. She had seen many families grapple with the emotional weight of watching a loved one recover from major surgery. "Better now that Mummy's here," Catherine replied honestly, giving her mother's hand another gentle squeeze.
Dr. Henderson smiled warmly. "Family support is often the best medicine we can provide. Mrs. Middleton, I'm glad you could be here. Your presence clearly means a great deal to Catherine."
As the nurse efficiently checked monitors and administered medication, Catherine's eyelids began to grow heavy. The pain medication was taking effect, providing the relief her body desperately needed. "Stay with me while I sleep," she asked her mother, the request carrying echoes of childhood illnesses when Carole would sit beside her bed until she felt better.
Of course, darling. I'm not going anywhere, Carole assured her, settling more comfortably in the bedside chair. As Catherine drifted toward sleep, her breathing becoming deeper and more regular, Carole found herself studying her daughter's face with the intense attention that only a mother can bring to such moments. Even in sleep, there were lines of tension around Catherine's eyes, evidence of the pain she was enduring. But there was also a peacefulness that hadn't been present when Carole first arrived. The presence of family, the assurance of love and support, had provided a comfort that no medical intervention could match. As the afternoon wore on, Carole maintained her vigil beside Catherine's bed. She responded to text messages from Michael and the children, providing updates on Catherine's condition and her own emotional state. Palace staff checked in periodically, ensuring that the visit was proceeding smoothly and that all necessary security protocols were being maintained. But, for Carole, the outside world had faded away. In this moment, in this room, she was simply a mother caring for her daughter. The titles, the protocols, the public expectations, none of it mattered compared to the fundamental bond between parent and child that had brought her to this bedside. When Catherine stirred again several hours later, the pain medication having provided significant relief, she found her mother exactly where she had been when she fell asleep. Carole was reading quietly, a paperback novel open in her lap, but her attention was clearly focused on her daughter. "You really stayed," Catherine murmured, her voice stronger now and tinged with gratitude. "I told you I wasn't going anywhere," Carole replied, closing her book and leaning forward to check Catherine's forehead for fever. "How are you feeling?" "Much better. The medication really helps." Catherine attempted to sit up straighter in bed, wincing only slightly with the movement. "Mummy, I'm sorry you were so upset earlier. I didn't want to worry you." Carole shook her head firmly. "Don't you dare apologize for being human, Catherine. You're allowed to hurt, you're allowed to be vulnerable, and you're certainly allowed to need your mother. That's what mothers are for." The conversation that followed was unlike many they had shared in recent years. Away from the demands of royal duties and public expectations, mother and daughter talked with an openness and honesty that their busy lives rarely afforded. They spoke of fears and hopes, of the challenges of balancing public service with personal needs, of the importance of family in navigating life's most difficult moments. As evening approached and visiting hours drew to a close, both women were emotionally drained but somehow strengthened by their time together. The crisis had reminded them of what truly mattered, not titles or positions or public obligations, but the enduring power of family love to provide comfort in times of greatest need. When it came time for Carole to leave, the goodbye was difficult for both of them. Catherine had grown stronger throughout the day, but the thought of spending the night alone in the hospital was daunting. Carole, for her part, found it almost impossible to walk away from her daughter while she was still recovering. "I'll be back tomorrow," Carole promised, gathering her coat and handbag. "And every day until you're well enough to come home." "You don't have to do that," Catherine protested, though her relief was evident. "Yes, I do," Carole replied firmly. "That's what mothers do." As she walked back down the hospital corridor, Carole reflected on the emotional journey of the day. She had come to the hospital fearing the worst, prepared for anything but hoping for reassurance. What she had found was a reminder of the profound responsibility and privilege of being a mother, not just to any daughter, but to one who carried such enormous public responsibility while remaining fundamentally human. The tears she had shed were not tears of weakness or despair, but tears of love, pure, powerful, maternal love that transcended every other consideration. In a world where her daughter was the Princess of Wales, future Queen of England, and global icon, Carole had been reminded that she would always be, first and foremost, Catherine's mummy. As her car pulled away from the London clinic, Carole felt a sense of peace settling over her. Catherine was going to be fine. The surgery was behind them, recovery was progressing well, and the family's love and support would see them through the challenging days ahead. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight, she could rest knowing that her daughter was safe, cared for, and surrounded by love. The emotional intensity of the day had been overwhelming, but it had also been necessary. Sometimes, even the strongest people need to acknowledge their vulnerabilities, to accept help, and to lean on those who love them most. For Catherine, that person would always be her mother. And, for Carole, being that source of strength and comfort would always be her greatest privilege and most important responsibility. The second day began before dawn for Carole Middleton. She had barely slept, her mind constantly returning to the image of Catherine lying pale and vulnerable in the hospital bed.
Every time she closed her eyes, she saw her daughter's pained expression, heard the hoarseness in her voice, felt the weakness in her grip when they held hands. Michael had tried to convince her to rest, to trust that Catherine was in the best possible care, but maternal instinct overrode logic. By 5 in the morning, Carole was already moving quietly through their Berkshire home, preparing for another day at the hospital. She had promised Catherine she would return, and nothing would prevent her from keeping that promise. The morning routine felt surreal, making coffee for herself and Michael, checking her phone for any overnight updates from the palace, preparing a small bag of items she thought might comfort her daughter. The items she packed revealed the depth of her maternal thoughtfulness. A small bottle of Catherine's favorite hand cream, the same lavender scent she had used since her teenage years. A cashmere scarf in soft blue, perfect for providing extra warmth without being too bulky. Several magazines that Catherine enjoyed but rarely had time to read. Most importantly, a framed photo of Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis from their last family holiday, something to remind Catherine of what awaited her at home. The drive to London felt longer than the day before, though traffic was actually lighter in the early morning hours. Carole found herself gripping the steering wheel tighter than necessary, her knuckles white with tension. She had spoken briefly with William the night before, and his updates had been positive. Catherine had slept better, her pain was more manageable, and she was beginning to eat small amounts of solid food. But a mother's worry doesn't diminish easily with second-hand reassurances. The London clinic looked different in the morning light. The building's Victorian facade seemed more imposing, more serious, against the grey January sky. The discreet entrance where family members were admitted was already busy with medical staff arriving for their shifts. Carole noticed how efficiently everyone moved, how professional and focused they appeared. It was reassuring to know that Catherine was surrounded by such competence and expertise. Security protocols were smoother on the second day. The protection officers recognized Carole immediately, greeting her with respectful nods and warm smiles. They had observed the emotional reunion between mother and daughter the previous day, and their professional detachment had been softened by the very human drama they had witnessed. Dr. Henderson met Carole on the third floor once again, but her demeanor was noticeably more relaxed than it had been 24 hours earlier. "She's had a much better night," the doctor reported as they walked toward Catherine's room. "Her vital signs are stronger, and she's responding very well to the pain management protocol. Most importantly, her spirits seem much improved." The transformation in Catherine was remarkable. When Carole entered the room, she found her daughter sitting up in bed, her color much improved and her eyes brighter and more alert. Catherine was even attempting to work on some official correspondence, though her movements were still careful and measured. "Mummy." Catherine's greeting was warm and genuinely happy, so different from the weak whisper of the previous day. "I was hoping you'd come early. I've been awake since 5, and I'm already bored with daytime television." The relief that flooded through Carole was almost overwhelming. This was much more like the Catherine she knew, engaged, energetic, already thinking about her responsibilities despite her circumstances. "You look so much better, darling. How are you feeling?" "Like I've been hit by a truck, but a much smaller truck than yesterday," Catherine replied with a hint of her characteristic humor. "The pain is definitely manageable now, and Dr. Henderson says I'm healing faster than expected." Carole settled into the familiar bedside chair, noting how much more comfortable Catherine appeared. The rigid tension that had characterized her posture the day before had eased considerably. She was still clearly recovering from major surgery, but the improvement was undeniable and encouraging. "I brought you a few things," Carole said, pulling items from her bag. Catherine's face lit up when she saw the framed photo of her children, and she immediately reached for it with careful movements. "Oh, they look so happy," she murmured, studying the image with the intense focus that mothers reserve for pictures of their children. "I miss them terribly. William brings them to visit every evening, but it's not the same as being home with them. They miss you too, but they're being so brave. George has appointed himself the man of the house, according to William. He's helping with Charlotte and Louis, making sure they eat their vegetables and brush their teeth properly." Carole's voice carried the pride and amusement that grandmothers feel when witnessing their grandchildren rise to meet challenges. As they talked, Carole began to understand more about what Catherine had endured during the surgery and the early stages of recovery. The procedure had been more complex than anyone had initially anticipated, requiring a longer surgery time and more extensive postoperative monitoring. Catherine had experienced complications with nausea and pain management that had made the first 48 hours particularly difficult. "I was so frightened," Catherine admitted quietly, her voice carrying a vulnerability that she rarely allowed others to see. "Not of the surgery itself, the medical team was wonderful, and I had complete confidence in them. But, lying there afterward, feeling so weak and disoriented, I felt so alone despite all the people caring for me." The admission struck Carole deeply. Her daughter lived much of her life in the public eye, surrounded by staff and supporters, rarely able to acknowledge moments of personal weakness or fear. But surgery and recovery had stripped away those layers of protection, leaving her vulnerable in a way that royal training couldn't address. "That's perfectly natural, darling," Carole assured her. "Surgery is traumatic for the body and the mind. Even when everything goes perfectly, recovery can feel overwhelming and isolating." They were interrupted by the arrival of a physiotherapist, a cheerful woman in her 40s who introduced herself as Sarah Collins. She had come to begin Catherine's post-operative mobility exercises, gentle movements designed to prevent complications and speed recovery. "Your Highness, are you ready for a little adventure?" Sarah asked with the kind of professional warmth that immediately put patients at ease. "We're going to start very slowly, just sitting on the edge of the bed and taking a few steps." Carole watched with a mixture of pride and concern as Catherine worked with the physiotherapist. Her daughter approached the exercises with typical determination, pushing herself to meet each goal despite obvious discomfort. But Carole could also see the effort each movement required, the way Catherine's face tightened with concentration and pain. The simple act of standing and taking 3 steps to a nearby chair was clearly exhausting for Catherine, but she accomplished it with characteristic grace. "Excellent progress," Sarah declared. "Tomorrow we'll try walking to the window and back." After the physiotherapist left, Catherine settled back into bed looking pleased but tired from the exertion. "I never realized how much energy such simple movements require when you're recovering," she confessed to her mother. "It makes you appreciate how much we normally take for granted." The conversation that followed touched on deeper themes that had been raised by Catherine's illness and hospitalization. They discussed the balance between public duty and personal health, the importance of acknowledging human limitations, and the challenge of maintaining vulnerability while serving in a public role that often demanded seeming invincible. "I've spent so many years trying to be strong for everyone else," Catherine reflected. "Strong for William, strong for the children, strong for the country. It's strange to find myself in a position where I have to accept being weak, at least temporarily." Carole recognized this struggle intimately. She had watched her daughter transform from a university student into a royal figure, observing how Catherine had learned to carry herself with dignity and composure in even the most challenging circumstances. But this experience was different. It demanded a kind of courage that had nothing to do with public appearances and everything to do with accepting help and showing vulnerability. "Strength isn't about never being weak," Carole told her daughter. "It's about knowing when to ask for help, when to rest, when to let others care for you. You've been strong in so many ways over the years, but maybe this is teaching you about a different kind of strength." The afternoon brought several visitors. Prince William arrived during his lunch break, carrying coffee for Carole and looking considerably more relaxed than he had the previous day. The improvement in Catherine's condition was clearly visible to him as well, and the relief in his expression was unmistakable. "The children want to make you get well cards," he told Catherine, settling into a second chair that had been brought into the room. "Charlotte insists that pink glitter will help you feel better faster, and Louis wants to draw you a picture of your favorite horse." The mention of her children brought the biggest smile Carole had seen on Catherine's face since arriving at the hospital. "Please tell them that pink glitter is definitely the best medicine," she replied. "And that I can't wait to see Louis's artwork." Dr. Henderson joined them for a brief consultation, providing updates on Catherine's progress and the expected timeline for her recovery. The news was entirely positive. All indicators suggested that Catherine was healing beautifully and could potentially be discharged several days earlier than originally projected. However, the doctor cautioned, early discharge depends entirely on taking recovery slowly and following all post-operative restrictions. No rushing back to official duties, no compromising on rest and rehabilitation. Carole saw something flicker across Catherine's face, the instinctive desire to minimize her own needs and return to normal activities as quickly as possible. It was a tendency that had served her well in royal life but could be counterproductive during medical recovery. "She'll follow every instruction to the letter," Carole said firmly, meeting her daughter's eyes with a look that brooked no argument. "Won't you, Catherine?" "Yes, Mummy," Catherine replied with a mixture of amusement and resignation. "Though I may need reminding occasionally." As the day progressed, Carole observed the steady stream of people who cared for and about her daughter. Nurses checking vital signs and administering medications with gentle efficiency. Palace staff providing updates on postponed engagements and rescheduled commitments. Security personnel maintaining their protective presence while allowing maximum privacy for the family. But it was during the quieter moments, when mother and daughter were alone, that the most meaningful conversations took place. They talked about Catherine's fears regarding the children's understanding of her illness, her frustration with physical limitations, and her anxiety about returning to public duties while still recovering. "The children are more resilient than you might think," Carole observed. "And they're learning valuable lessons about illness and recovery, about how families support each other during difficult times." "I worry that they're frightened," Catherine admitted. "Hospital visits and Mummy being sick, it's a lot for young children to process." "Children are remarkable at adapting to circumstances when they feel secure in their parents' love," Carole replied. "William is handling everything beautifully, and you're showing them that it's okay to need help sometimes, that being strong doesn't mean never being vulnerable." As evening approached, the emotional weight of the day began to take its toll on both women. Catherine was clearly tired from her first full day of physical therapy and extended conversations, but she also seemed emotionally lighter than she had since the surgery. The presence of family, the progress in her recovery, and the reassurance about her children had all contributed to a sense of optimism about the days ahead. "I think I'm finally beginning to believe that this is going to be all right," Catherine told her mother as visiting hours drew to a close. "Yesterday, everything felt so overwhelming and uncertain. Today feels manageable." Carole felt tears threatening again, but these were different from the previous day's overwhelming emotional release. These were tears of relief and gratitude, relief that her daughter was clearly on the path to recovery, and gratitude for the reminder of how precious and fragile the people we love truly are. "You're going to be better than all right," she assured Catherine. "You're going to be stronger than ever, in all the ways that matter." The goodbye was easier than it had been the day before, though still difficult. Catherine was clearly tired but no longer seemed fragile or overwhelmed. The improvement in just 24 hours had been remarkable, testament to both the quality of her medical care and her own inner strength. As Carole gathered her things to leave, Catherine caught her hand. "Thank you for being here, for crying with me yesterday, for not trying to make everything seem fine when it wasn't. I needed to know it was okay to not be perfect, even for just a few days." "You never have to be perfect for me," Carole replied, squeezing her daughter's hand gently. "You just have to be my Catherine, and that's always more than enough." Walking through the hospital corridors for the second time, Carole reflected on how different this departure felt from the previous evening. Yesterday, she had left feeling emotionally drained but deeply concerned about her daughter's physical and emotional state. Tonight, she left feeling hopeful and proud of Catherine's strength, proud of her own ability to provide the support her daughter needed, and hopeful about the recovery that lay ahead. The drive home through London's evening traffic provided time for contemplation. The past 2 days had been among the most emotionally challenging of Carole's life, but they had also been profoundly meaningful. In a world where her daughter's life was often defined by public duties and royal protocols, illness had created a space for the most fundamental human connections, mother and daughter, family love overcoming all other considerations. When she arrived home in Berkshire, Michael was waiting with dinner and eager questions about Catherine's progress. As she shared the details of the day, Carole realized that the experience had taught her something important about the nature of strength and vulnerability. Her daughter had needed to be weak to become stronger, had needed to accept help to fully appreciate her own capabilities. Most importantly, Catherine had needed her mother, not the Princess of Wales needing protocol or support staff, but simply a daughter needing the irreplaceable comfort that only a mother can provide. For Carole, being able to provide that comfort, to witness her daughter's vulnerability and strength in equal measure, had been a profound reminder of the enduring power of maternal love. As she prepared for bed, Carole felt a sense of peace settling over her. Tomorrow would bring another day at the hospital, more opportunities to support Catherine's recovery, more chances to witness her daughter's remarkable resilience. The worst was clearly behind them, and the path forward, while requiring patience and care, was illuminated with hope and love. The third morning brought unexpected news that would test the emotional progress both Catherine and her mother had made over the previous 2 days. Dr. Henderson called Carole personally at 6 in the morning, her voice carrying a tone that immediately triggered maternal alarm bells. Mrs. Middleton, I wanted to reach you before you left for the hospital this morning, the doctor began, her words measured and careful.
Catherine had a difficult night.
She's stable and safe, but we've encountered a minor complication that requires our immediate attention.
Carole's heart dropped as she listened to the explanation.
Catherine had developed signs of a post-operative infection at the surgical site, nothing life-threatening but serious enough to require additional monitoring, stronger antibiotics, and likely an extension of her hospital stay. The infection had caused her fever to spike during the night, bringing back much of the pain and weakness that had characterized her first day of recovery.
She's asking for you, Dr. Henderson continued.
She's understandably upset about this setback, and I believe your presence would be beneficial for both her physical and emotional recovery. By 7 in the morning, Carole was already on the road to London, driving faster than she normally would and fighting back the anxiety that threatened to overwhelm her. Just when it seemed that Catherine was making excellent progress, this complication served as a stark reminder of how unpredictable and challenging recovery from major surgery could be.
The scene at the hospital was markedly different from the previous day.
The medical staff moved with increased urgency, and additional specialists had been called in for consultation. Catherine's room buzzed with activity as nurses monitored her more frequently and new medications were added to her treatment regimen. When Carole entered Catherine's room, she found her daughter looking significantly worse than she had the previous evening. Catherine's fever had broken during the early morning hours, but she appeared exhausted and discouraged. The optimism and strength she had displayed just 12 hours earlier had been replaced by frustration and worry.
"Mummy," Catherine said weakly, her voice carrying the disappointment that comes with unexpected setbacks. "I thought I was getting better.
Yesterday felt so positive, and now everything feels terrible again." The sight of her daughter's renewed vulnerability triggered another wave of intense emotion in Carole. All the progress they had celebrated, all the hope they had built together, seemed threatened by this new development. But, this time, Carole was better prepared for the emotional impact. Her tears came, but they were accompanied by a fierce determination to help her daughter navigate this additional challenge. "Setbacks are part of recovery, darling," Carole said, settling immediately into the familiar bedside chair and reaching for Catherine's hand.
"Dr. Henderson explained everything to me on the phone.
This is treatable, it's manageable, and it doesn't change the fact that you're going to make a full recovery."
Catherine's frustration was evident in every aspect of her demeanor.
"I was so ready to start getting my strength back, to begin thinking about going home.
Now they're talking about another week in the hospital, maybe more.
The children were so excited that I might be home by the weekend." The mention of disappointing her children clearly weighed heavily on Catherine's mind. As a mother, Carole understood that guilt intimately, the way maternal responsibilities can make personal setbacks feel like failures that affect everyone you love. Dr. Henderson joined them shortly after Carole's arrival, bringing with her Dr. Michael Chen, an infectious disease specialist who had been consulted about Catherine's condition. Both doctors worked to provide clear, comprehensive explanations about what had occurred and what the treatment plan would involve. Postoperative infections occur in approximately 15% of abdominal surgeries, Dr. Chen explained. They're frustrating because they interrupt recovery, but they're also entirely manageable with the right antibiotic protocol. Princess Catherine's infection was caught early, which is excellent news for treatment outcomes. Catherine listened to the medical explanations with characteristic intelligence and attention to detail, asking thoughtful questions about timeline and treatment options. But Carole could see the emotional toll this setback was taking on her daughter, the way hope was being replaced by resignation and discouragement.
"How long before we know if the antibiotics are working?"
Catherine asked, her voice steady but her eyes reflecting deep concern. "We should see improvement within 48 to 72 hours, Dr. Chen replied. "If your body responds as expected, we'll see your white blood cell count normalize and your energy levels begin to improve again." After the doctors left, mother and daughter were alone with the weight of this new challenge.
Catherine turned her face toward the window, staring out at the London skyline with an expression of profound disappointment.
"I feel like I'm letting everyone down," she admitted quietly. "William is managing everything at home, the palace is rearranging schedules, the children are confused about why Mummy can't come home yet.
I'm supposed to be strong enough to handle whatever life throws at me." Carole recognized this self-criticism as deeply characteristic of her daughter.
Catherine had always held herself to impossibly high standards, always felt personally responsible for any situation that affected those around her.
But illness and recovery operated by different rules than royal duty or personal determination.
You're not letting anyone down, Carole said firmly. You're fighting an infection while recovering from major surgery. You're being as strong as any human being can be under these circumstances. The conversation that followed was one of the most honest they had shared about the psychological challenges of Catherine's public role. Her daughter talked openly about the pressure of always appearing composed and capable, about the difficulty of showing vulnerability when so many people looked to her as an example of strength and resilience. Sometimes I wonder if I've forgotten how to just be human, Catherine confessed. I've spent so many years being the Princess of Wales that I'm not sure I remember how to simply be a person who's sick and needs time to recover. Carole understood this struggle in ways that few others could. She had watched her daughter transform from a confident but relatively private young woman into one of the world's most scrutinized public figures. The transformation had been remarkable, but it had come with costs that were rarely visible to the outside world. Being human is exactly what you need to be right now, Carole told her. Not the Princess of Wales, not a role model, not an inspiration to anyone. Just Catherine, who is sick and needs time and care to get better. The afternoon brought visits from William and the children, though the younger ones were kept to a brief, carefully managed visit due to the infection risk. Prince George, at 10 years old, seemed to understand the seriousness of the situation better than his siblings, and his mature concern for his mother was both touching and heartbreaking to witness. "Mummy, are you going to be okay?" he asked with the directness that children bring to frightening situations. "Papa says you're just sick and we'll get better, but you look really tired." Catherine summoned strength from somewhere deep inside herself to reassure her eldest son. "I am tired, my love, but the doctors are taking excellent care of me. Sometimes getting better takes longer than we expect, but I promise you that I'm going to be fine." Princess Charlotte, only 8 years old, seemed less concerned with the medical aspects of her mother's condition than with the practical implications. "When you come home, can we have a tea party in your bed?" she asked, her question revealing her desire to nurture her mother in the way children understand best. "That sounds like the perfect celebration for when I'm feeling stronger," Catherine promised, her voice warming with maternal love despite her physical discomfort. 5-year-old Prince Louis was primarily confused by the whole situation, more interested in the hospital equipment than in understanding why his mother was in the bed surrounded by it. His innocent questions about the beeping machines and for tubes provided moments of lightness in an otherwise heavy day. After the family visit, Catherine seemed both emotionally strengthened by seeing her children and physically exhausted by the effort of maintaining composure for their sake. Carole observed how naturally her daughter shifted between her roles: patient needing care, mother providing reassurance, wife supporting her husband's concerns about managing everything alone. "It's exhausting, isn't it?" Carole observed gently. "Being everything to everyone, even when you're sick." Catherine nodded slowly. "I don't know how to turn it off. Even lying here with an infection, I'm worried about whether William is remembering to check Charlotte's homework and whether George is eating enough vegetables." "That's what makes you a good mother," Carole replied. "But, right now, other people can handle those responsibilities. Your only job is getting better." As evening approached, Catherine's fever began to rise again, a development that concerned the nursing staff and required additional monitoring. The sight of her daughter becoming flushed and uncomfortable triggered another wave of maternal anguish in Carole. Just when she thought she had processed the emotional impact of Catherine's illness, new challenges arose to test her emotional resilience. The night nurse, an experienced woman named Patricia who had worked with many high-profile patients, provided both medical expertise and emotional support for the family. She explained that fever spikes were common with infections, that the antibiotics needed time to take effect, and that Catherine's overall condition remained stable despite this temporary worsening. "Infections often get worse before they get better," Patricia explained to Carole during a quiet moment outside Catherine's room. "It's the body's way of fighting back. What's important is that all her other vital signs remain strong, and she's responding appropriately to treatment." When Carole returned to Catherine's bedside, she found her daughter struggling with both physical discomfort and emotional distress. The fever was making Catherine feel confused and anxious, and the setback had undermined her confidence about recovery. "What if this gets worse?" Catherine asked, her voice carrying a fear she rarely allowed herself to express. "What if there are more complications? What if I can't get better?" The questions revealed the depths of Catherine's vulnerability, fears that she had been hiding beneath her usual composure and determination. Carole recognized that her daughter needed permission to be afraid, space to voice her worst concerns without being immediately reassured or told not to worry. Those are scary thoughts, Carole acknowledged, sitting down beside Catherine's bed and taking her hand. It's natural to have them when you're feeling sick and uncomfortable. Tell me what you're most afraid of. The conversation that followed was difficult but necessary. Catherine talked about her fears of serious complications, about leaving her children without their mother, about being unable to fulfill her royal duties. She spoke about feeling helpless and out of control, emotions that were particularly challenging for someone accustomed to managing complex situations and public responsibilities.
I've never felt this vulnerable, Catherine admitted.
Even during childbirth, even during the most difficult moments in royal life, I've always felt like I had some control over the situation. This feels completely beyond my control. Carole listened without trying to minimize or dismiss her daughter's fears. She understood that Catherine needed to voice these anxieties, to have them acknowledged and validated, before she could begin to move beyond them. Feeling vulnerable is terrifying, Carole agreed.
But vulnerability doesn't mean weakness, and it doesn't mean defeat.
It means you're human, and humans need help sometimes. As the night wore on, Catherine's fever gradually began to respond to the increased antibiotic dosage and additional medications. Her temperature dropped slowly but steadily, and, with it, some of her anxiety and confusion cleared. The improvement was subtle but measurable, providing hope that the treatment protocol was beginning to work. Dr. Chen checked on Catherine late in the evening, reviewing her latest blood work and vital signs.
The results showed early signs of improvement, white blood cell counts trending in the right direction, inflammatory markers beginning to decrease.
We're seeing exactly what we want to see, he reported to both Catherine and Carole.
The infection is responding to treatment. You should feel considerably better by tomorrow afternoon.
The relief in Catherine's face was immediate and profound. The fear and uncertainty that had characterized the day began to give way to renewed hope and determination. She was still sick, still facing several more days of recovery, but the trajectory was once again pointing toward healing. Thank you for staying with me through all of this, Catherine told her mother as the evening drew to a close. For letting me be afraid, for not telling me to be brave when I didn't feel brave. Carole felt tears threatening again, but these were tears of pride and love rather than fear and worry. Her daughter had faced a significant setback with grace and honesty, had allowed herself to be vulnerable while still maintaining the core strength that would carry her through recovery. You never have to be brave for me, Carole replied. You just have to be real, and honest, and willing to let me help you through the difficult parts. As Carole prepared to leave for the night, she reflected on how the day's challenges had deepened her understanding of her daughter's character. Catherine's response to the infection setback had revealed not weakness but a different kind of strength, the courage to be vulnerable, to ask for help, to admit when circumstances felt overwhelming. The drive home through London's night traffic provided time to process the emotional complexity of the day. The setback had been frightening, but it had also provided opportunities for deeper connection and understanding between mother and daughter. Catherine had needed to face her fears about illness and recovery, and Carole had needed to learn how to support her daughter through genuine uncertainty and vulnerability. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight, Carole felt a quiet confidence that they would face those challenges together, with honesty and love and the unshakable bond between mother and daughter that had sustained them through the most difficult moments of this unexpected journey. The fourth day marked a turning point that would prove to be both medically significant and emotionally transformative for both Catherine and her mother. Carole arrived at the hospital to find a scene of cautious optimism among the medical staff, a marked contrast to the previous day's heightened concern about the infection. Dr. Chen met Carole in the corridor outside Catherine's room, his expression carrying the first genuinely positive news she had heard in 24 hours. The antibiotics have worked even better than we hoped, he reported with a smile.
Catherine's blood work this morning shows dramatic improvement.
The infection is clearly responding to treatment, and all her vital signs are stabilizing beautifully.
When Carole entered Catherine's room, the transformation was immediately apparent.
Her daughter was sitting up in bed, looking alert and considerably more comfortable than she had the previous evening. The flushed appearance and glassy-eyed confusion of fever had been replaced by clear eyes and improved color. Most importantly, Catherine was smiling, a genuine expression of relief and renewed hope. "Mummy, I feel like myself again," Catherine announced as soon as she saw her mother. It's amazing how much difference one night can make when your body finally starts winning the fight. The relief that flooded through Carole was so intense it was almost physical. For 3 days, she had watched her daughter struggle with pain, weakness, and fear. To see Catherine looking genuinely better, sounding stronger, and displaying her characteristic optimism felt like witnessing a minor miracle. "You look wonderful, darling," Carole said, settling into what had become her familiar chair beside the bed.
"I can see it in your eyes, you're really feeling better, aren't you?" "So much better. The pain is manageable, I'm not confused and anxious like I was last night, and, for the first time since the surgery, I actually feel hungry." Catherine's enthusiasm was infectious, filling the room with positive energy that had been absent during the difficult previous day. Dr. Henderson joined them for the morning consultation, bringing with her the kind of comprehensive update that provided real hope for the days ahead. All of Catherine's tests showed improvement, the infection was responding better than anticipated to the antibiotic treatment, and the original surgical site was healing properly underneath the infection. "We're looking at a significant acceleration of your recovery timeline," Dr. Henderson explained. "If this progress continues, we could potentially discuss discharge planning by early next week rather than the extended stay we were considering yesterday." The news brought tears of joy to Carole's eyes, the first entirely positive emotion she had experienced since this ordeal began. To hear concrete discussion of Catherine coming home, of this nightmare finally ending, felt almost too good to believe. Catherine's response was characteristically thoughtful and responsible. "What does that mean in terms of recovery restrictions? I understand that leaving the hospital doesn't mean returning to normal activities." "Absolutely correct," Dr. Henderson confirmed.
"You'll need several more weeks of careful recovery at home, with limitations on physical activity, regular follow-up appointments, and a gradual return to your normal responsibilities. But the fact that we're discussing it means your body is healing exactly as we hoped." The conversation that followed revealed how much the past few days had changed Catherine's perspective on health, recovery, and the balance between personal needs and public responsibilities. She spoke with new understanding about the importance of taking recovery seriously, about not rushing back to activities that might compromise healing.
"I think I needed to learn some difficult lessons about my own limitations," Catherine reflected.
"I've always prided myself on pushing through challenges, on meeting every obligation regardless of how I felt physically. This experience has taught me that sometimes the most responsible thing I can do is prioritize my own health."
Carole was struck by the maturity and wisdom in her daughter's words.
The woman lying in the hospital bed was still the same Catherine she had raised, but the experience of serious illness had added new dimensions to her character. She seemed more grounded, more self-aware, more willing to acknowledge her own humanity. The afternoon brought an unexpected visitor who would provide another layer of emotional complexity to an already significant day. Queen Camilla arrived for a private visit, her presence both formal acknowledgement of Catherine's importance to the royal family and genuine personal concern for her well-being. "Catherine, my dear, you look so much better than William led me to believe," the Queen said warmly, her manner striking the perfect balance between royal protocol and familial affection.
"We've all been quite worried about you."
Carole observed the interaction with interest, noting how naturally Catherine shifted into her royal role even while sitting in a hospital bed wearing a hospital gown. The Princess of Wales emerged seamlessly, providing updates on her condition and expressing appropriate concern for any inconvenience her illness might have caused to the royal schedule. "Please don't worry about the postponed engagements," Queen Camilla assured her. "Everything has been rearranged, and the most important thing is your complete recovery. The monarchy will function perfectly well while you take the time you need to get better." The royal visit lasted nearly an hour, during which Catherine demonstrated remarkable composure and engagement despite her recent medical challenges. Carole watched with pride as her daughter navigated the complex dynamics of family relationships, royal protocol, and personal vulnerability with grace and intelligence. After Queen Camilla left, Catherine seemed energized but also emotionally processing the significance of the visit. "It means a great deal that she came personally," Catherine told her mother. "It's acknowledgement that this illness, this recovery, matters to the institution as well as to the family." "You matter to everyone," Carole replied simply.
"Not just as the Princess of Wales, but as Catherine.
Everyone who knows you has been worried and hoping for your recovery." The late afternoon brought physical therapy with Sarah Collins, who was delighted with Catherine's improved condition and energy levels. The exercises that had been exhausting and painful just 2 days earlier were now manageable challenges that Catherine approached with determination and optimism. "Your progress is remarkable," Sarah observed as Catherine successfully completed a series of movements that tested her surgical recovery.
"The infection setback actually doesn't seem to have slowed your physical healing at all. Your body is remarkably resilient."
Watching her daughter regain strength and mobility, Carole felt overwhelming gratitude for the medical professionals who had guided Catherine through the most challenging aspects of recovery. The expertise, compassion, and dedication of everyone involved in her care had been extraordinary. As evening approached, the atmosphere in Catherine's room felt fundamentally different from any previous day. Hope had replaced fear, strength was returning to replace vulnerability, and the future was beginning to look bright again rather than uncertain and concerning. "I think I'm ready to start planning for going home," Catherine announced, her voice carrying excitement rather than the worry that had characterized earlier discussions of discharge. "I want to see the children's bedrooms again, sleep in my own bed, have breakfast with my family." The simple domestic pleasures Catherine described resonated deeply with Carole. After days of medical procedures, hospital schedules, and institutional surroundings, the prospect of returning to normal family life seemed precious beyond measure. "They'll be so excited," Carole agreed. "Charlotte has been planning that tea party in your bedroom for days. Louis has been saving his artwork to show you when you come home. And George has been such a responsible big brother through all of this." As they talked about the family reunion that awaited Catherine's discharge, both women reflected on how the experience had affected everyone involved. William had discovered reserves of single-parent capability he hadn't known he possessed. The children had learned about illness, recovery, and family support in ways that would serve them throughout their lives. And the extended family had been reminded of how precious and fragile their connections truly were. "This has been one of the most difficult experiences of my life," Catherine admitted as the day drew to a close. "But it's also taught me things I needed to learn about accepting help, showing vulnerability, and trusting other people to support me when I can't support myself." Carole understood exactly what her daughter meant. The ordeal had been terrifying and emotionally exhausting, but it had also revealed the depth of love and support that surrounded Catherine. Family, friends, medical professionals, and even the broader public had rallied around her during her illness, providing care and concern that went far beyond duty or obligation. "You've handled this with such grace," Carole told her daughter. "Even at your weakest moments, you've shown strength. Even when you were frightened, you've remained thoughtful about everyone else who was affected." "I had an excellent example," Catherine replied, squeezing her mother's hand. "Watching how you've been present for every difficult moment, how you've let me be vulnerable without trying to fix everything immediately. That's shown me what real strength looks like." The compliment moved Carole deeply, but she also recognized that both of them had grown through this experience. She had learned about supporting someone through genuine crisis, about providing comfort without false reassurance, about being strong enough to witness suffering without being overwhelmed by it. As visiting hours ended and Carole prepared to leave for another night, the goodbye felt different from all the previous departures. Instead of worry and uncertainty about what the night might bring, she felt confident and hopeful. Catherine was clearly on the path to full recovery, the medical crisis had passed, and the family could begin looking forward to reunion and normal life. "Tomorrow we'll start making real plans for going home," Catherine said as her mother gathered her things. "Dr. Henderson thinks by the weekend, maybe Monday at the latest." "I'll be here to help with whatever you need," Carole promised. "Discharge planning, transportation arrangements, making sure everything is ready for you at home." The drive through London traffic felt celebratory rather than anxious for the first time since this ordeal began. Carole found herself actually looking forward to the next day, to continued progress, to the practical joy of helping her daughter transition from patient back to wife and mother. When she arrived home in Berkshire, Michael was waiting with champagne and a desire to hear every detail of Catherine's remarkable improvement. As they celebrated the good news together, Carole realized that the family had emerged from this crisis stronger and more connected than before. The experience had tested everyone involved, but it had also revealed the unshakable foundation of love and support that would sustain them through any future challenges. Catherine's recovery was now assured, but more than that, the family had learned invaluable lessons about facing adversity together, supporting each other through vulnerability, and finding strength in unexpected places. Tomorrow would bring new progress, continued healing, and concrete steps toward Catherine's return to the life and responsibilities she loved. But tonight, Carole could rest peacefully knowing that the worst was behind them and that her daughter's remarkable courage and resilience had carried them all through one of the most challenging experiences any family could face. The final morning at the London clinic arrived with an atmosphere of celebration and anticipation that seemed to transform even the hospital corridors. After nearly a week of uncertainty, setbacks, and gradual progress, Catherine was finally going home. Carole arrived early to help with discharge preparations, her heart lighter than it had been since this ordeal began. Catherine was already awakened, dressed in her own clothes when Carole entered the room, a simple but elegant navy dress that somehow made her look immediately more like herself again. The hospital gowns and medical equipment that had defined her appearance for days had been replaced by the familiar confidence and grace that characterized the Princess of Wales. "Mummy, look at me, I'm a real person again," Catherine announced with a laugh, spinning carefully to show off her outfit. "I'd forgotten how wonderful it feels to wear real clothes and proper shoes." The transformation was remarkable. While Catherine still moved with the careful deliberation of someone recovering from surgery, the vibrant personality that had been muted by illness and medication was clearly returning. Her eyes sparkled with anticipation, and her smile carried genuine joy rather than the polite composure she had maintained for visitors. Dr. Henderson arrived with a comprehensive discharge packet and final instructions that would govern Catherine's recovery over the coming weeks. The medical team had prepared detailed guidelines covering everything from activity restrictions to medication schedules to warning signs that would require immediate medical attention. "Your recovery has been exemplary," Dr. Henderson told Catherine as they reviewed the discharge instructions together. "The infection complication was concerning but ultimately didn't slow your healing. You should be able to resume normal activities gradually over the next 4 to 6 weeks." Carole listened carefully to every instruction, knowing that she would play a crucial role in ensuring Catherine followed all the medical guidelines properly. The discharge plan included regular checkups, specific limitations on physical activity, and a gradual return to royal duties that prioritized Catherine's health over any schedule pressures. "The most important thing to remember is patience," Dr. Chen added, joining them for the final consultation. "Your body has been through significant trauma and stress. Recovery isn't linear, and there may be days when you feel tired or uncomfortable even as you're healing properly." Catherine nodded seriously, demonstrating the mature understanding of recovery that her illness had taught her. "I've learned not to underestimate the importance of rest and proper healing. This experience has taught me that taking care of my health isn't selfish, it's necessary for being able to fulfill all my other responsibilities." The philosophical growth that Catherine had undergone during her hospital stay was evident in every conversation. She spoke with new appreciation for her health, deeper understanding of her own limitations, and enhanced gratitude for the support systems that surrounded her. The ordeal had been difficult, but it had clearly contributed to her development as both a person and a public figure. Palace staff arrived to coordinate the carefully planned departure that would allow Catherine to leave the hospital with privacy and dignity. The logistics were complex, involving security arrangements, transportation coordination, and media management to ensure that her discharge didn't become a public spectacle. "The children are beside themselves with excitement," William reported when he arrived to escort his wife home. "Charlotte has been rearranging her bedroom since yesterday so that you can see all her artwork immediately. Louis has been practicing the songs he wants to sing for you. And George has appointed himself your personal assistant for the next week." The mention of her children brought the biggest smile Carole had seen on Catherine's face since before the surgery. The prospect of being reunited with her family, of returning to the rhythms of normal domestic life, clearly energized Catherine in ways that medical treatment alone couldn't achieve. As they prepared to leave, Catherine took a moment to personally thank each member of the medical team that had cared for her. She spoke individually with the nurses who had monitored her around the clock, the physiotherapists who had guided her mobility recovery, and the specialists who had managed her infection. "Your care has been extraordinary," she told them. "Not just the medical expertise, but the compassion and attention you've shown to my entire family throughout this experience. You've made an incredibly difficult situation as bearable as possible." Carole watched this gracious farewell with pride, recognizing her daughter's characteristic thoughtfulness even in moments of personal celebration. Catherine had learned much about accepting help during her illness, but she had never forgotten the importance of acknowledging and appreciating those who provided that help. The departure from the London clinic was emotional for everyone involved. After nearly a week of hospital routines, medical procedures, and institutional surroundings, leaving felt like emerging into a different world. The London streets looked brighter, the winter air felt fresher, and even the familiar sight of the Royal Protection Officers seemed more like celebration than necessity. Catherine traveled in the car with William, while Carole followed in a separate vehicle, allowing the couple private time for their reunion while ensuring that maternal support remained immediately available. The journey to their country residence gave Catherine her first extended view of the outside world since her surgery, and she seemed to drink in every detail with renewed appreciation. I never realized how much I would miss simple things like seeing trees and sky, Catherine confided to William, her voice carrying wonder at experiences she had always taken for granted. The hospital room felt so isolated from normal life. When they arrived at their family home, the children's reunion with their mother was everything Carole had hoped it would be. Charlotte ran to Catherine with carefully restrained enthusiasm, mindful of the instructions she'd received about being gentle with Mummy. George maintained his self-appointed responsibility as protector, staying close to ensure his mother wasn't overwhelmed. Louis simply seemed delighted to have his mother back where she belonged. "Mummy, you look different," Charlotte observed with the directness that children bring to significant moments. "You look tired but happy." "I am tired, my love, but seeing all of you makes me happier than anything in the world," Catherine replied, settling carefully onto the sofa so she could embrace all three children without straining her surgical recovery. Carole observed the family reunion with tears of joy, recognizing how precious and fragile these ordinary domestic moments truly were. The past week had taught everyone involved not to take health, presence, or family time for granted. Catherine's illness had been a reminder that even the strongest people can become vulnerable, and even the most carefully planned lives can be disrupted by unexpected circumstances. The afternoon was spent in quiet family activities designed around Catherine's energy levels and recovery needs. She read stories to the children, admired their artwork, and listened to their accounts of everything that had happened while she was in the hospital. The normalcy was therapeutic for everyone, providing a sense of stability and continuity after days of uncertainty. "It's amazing how quickly everything feels normal again," Catherine told her mother as they sat together while the children played nearby. "Just a few hours at home, and the hospital already feels like something that happened to someone else." But Carole could see that the experience had left lasting changes in her daughter. Catherine moved with more awareness of her physical limitations, spoke with deeper appreciation for her health and family, and demonstrated a newfound willingness to accept help rather than insisting on handling everything herself. Dr. Henderson called in the evening to check on Catherine's first day at home, providing an opportunity to address any concerns or questions about the transition from hospital to home care. The conversation was entirely positive. Catherine was comfortable, managing her pain well, and adjusting smoothly to the new medication schedule. "The most important thing now is patience," the doctor reminded them. "Recovery continues for weeks after leaving the hospital. Don't be surprised by good days and difficult days, and don't hesitate to call if anything seems concerning." As the evening wound down and the children were settled for bed, Catherine, William, and Carole had their first real opportunity to reflect on the experience they had all navigated together. The week had been challenging for everyone, but it had also revealed the strength of their family bonds and support systems. "I don't think I've ever been more grateful for anything than I am right now," Catherine said as they sat in the comfortable familiarity of their living room. "Grateful for excellent medical care, grateful for family support, grateful for my own body's ability to heal, grateful for the reminder of what really matters in life." The gratitude in Catherine's voice was profound and genuine, reflecting the perspective shift that serious illness can bring to anyone's worldview. Priorities had been clarified, relationships had been deepened, and assumptions about health and strength had been permanently altered. Carole understood that her role as primary support during Catherine's illness was transitioning but not ending. The coming weeks would require continued attention to recovery needs, help with childcare when Catherine's energy was low, and ongoing emotional support as she gradually returned to her full range of activities and responsibilities. "I've learned so much about myself during this experience," Catherine reflected as the day drew to a close. "About my limitations, about the importance of asking for help, about how much love and support I have in my life. In some ways, as difficult as it's been, I'm grateful for the lessons." The wisdom and maturity in Catherine's words moved Carole deeply. Her daughter had faced a significant health challenge with grace, courage, and openness to growth. The experience had revealed not weakness but a different kind of strength, the strength to be vulnerable, to accept help, and to emerge from difficulty with enhanced appreciation for life's gifts. As Carole prepared to return to her own home for the first time in nearly a week, she reflected on the remarkable journey they had all shared. The emotional roller coaster of fear, hope, setbacks, and recovery had tested everyone involved, but it had also demonstrated the unshakable power of family love to sustain people through their most challenging moments. "Thank you for everything, Mummy," Catherine said as they said goodnight. "For being there every day, for crying with me when I needed to cry, for celebrating with me when things got better. For showing me that it's okay to need help and that accepting support doesn't diminish strength." The thanks were deeply meaningful to Carole, but she also understood that supporting her daughter through illness had been one of the greatest privileges of her life. Being present for Catherine's vulnerability and recovery had reminded her of the fundamental importance of family bonds and maternal love in facing life's most significant challenges. Driving home through the quiet countryside, Carole felt a profound sense of completion and gratitude. Catherine was safely home with her family, her recovery was progressing beautifully, and the crisis that had dominated their lives for the past week was finally behind them. Most importantly, the experience had deepened their relationships and provided valuable lessons about resilience, vulnerability, and the enduring power of love to sustain us through our most difficult moments. The future would bring continued recovery, gradual return to normal activities, and eventual resumption of the royal duties that were such an important part of Catherine's life. But it would also bring enhanced appreciation for health, family, and the ordinary domestic pleasures that had seemed so precious during their absence. Catherine's illness had been frightening and challenging, but it had also been a reminder of what truly matters in life, and, for that reminder, despite everything they had endured, Carole felt genuinely grateful.